Until this day, like, you talk to Afrikaners, you could actually say to an Afrikaner, guy, give me your company 50%. And he'll be like, yeah, I'll do a BE deal. But if you say to them, we'll stop having Afrikaans in the schools, what do you think they'll say? That identity and their culture is so important to them because their freedom is contextualized by their oppression. Look at one of the most powerful super military powers in the world today, one of the smallest countries, smaller than Kruger National Park, Israel. Why? Because these cats, this Jewish community, like wherever they went, Russia, guys were after them. When things got bad, guys are like, blame the Jews. Spanish Inquisition, they went after them, like all through Europe, and then eventually Hitler, and then everyone said, no, we got to have our own place. But having their own place wasn't enough. They needed the security, that safety net. And that's why today, they've got a huge army, they're a military power. They supply the US with a significant amount of the technology that they use in their armaments, in their military. Because their freedom to exist is contextualized by the fact that there's the threat of them being wiped out. That's their oppression. So what's our oppression? Because if we're thinking about our freedom, let's take a moment to think about our oppression. Our oppression. I think there's a seminal moment in our oppression. It happens when a little boy finds a little marble around the banks of the Orange River. It's like 1867. Little boy, his name is Erasmus Jacobs. He's playing, he finds this little marble, plays with it. His neighbor says, it's a nice shiny stone. Let me see what you got there. He gives it to him, he goes, oh, scheiße. The thing later becomes known as the Eureka diamond. First diamond found in South Africa. A few years later, a group of Dutch brothers called the De Beers. They got by themselves a farm. A farm is called Vooruitzig. It's in Kimberley. They find a couple of pebbles and stones. Next thing you know, it's July. By Christmas, it's a mining town. Everybody and the mom has come in there. 3 years later, there's 50,000 people. This was a farm, just a farm, nothing. 3 years later, 50,000 people camped out there digging. And how they did it is everyone was allowed a stake, 2 stakes. And what you did is you all lined up on a line. They gave you 2 stakes. Then they get, go! And then you run and you put your stake in the ground. Right? Your stake. That's how you get your stake. So today, that's why stake is used as equity. You run and you put your stake in the ground, then you run, you put your next stake in the ground, and then it's like almost 9 meter. That 9 little meters is yours. You mine that. You go there, you get your shovel, you get your pick, and you dig that thing out and you find yourself diamonds. It's incredible. If you've ever gone to Kimberley, you know the big hole? That's how it started. Guys ran, put the thing in, then they started digging, and then that's that. But a couple of years later, something starts happening. Guys start consolidating. And then they get really smart about this. They're consolidating, then they go for cheap labor. At the time, cheap labor, black labor, cheap labor, black labor. So a few guys start calling black guys in. A few smart black people themselves start going in. And one chief actually sends his entire tribe, all the men of his tribe, to go there and mine, bring that money back. Yeah, it's Pilani, yeah. So, smart guy. But now what happens is that initially it was just white people here, And then suddenly blacks start coming in. But now whites already have a view that black people are thieves and all of that. So they pass a law. In 1882, it's called the Diamond Trading Act. And you could not trade diamonds or effectively be in possession of a diamond without a license. Okay? And there's certain criteria as to how you get a license. And effectively then shuts out all ability of black people to participate in this new gold rush or diamond rush at the time. I looked at it, and this was one of the first laws that uses segregation for an economic benefit. Right? So we're not just talking about like racial laws. We're just talking about, it's a racial law that says we're keeping you out so we can benefit. Let me give you an example. The hut tax. With the hut tax, the British guys went over and said, okay, look, you've got a hut, and for every hut you have, we're going to charge you X amount. But at the time, the people that had huts, and lots of huts, didn't have money, paper money, right? They had cattle. So they'd go to a homestead, and the more huts you had, obviously, the more cattle you have. And the more huts you have, the more they charge you. Now you can't pay in cash, so you have to pay in cattle. Or you have to send your sons to go and work in a farm or a mine later on. The hut tax deliberately makes black people leave their lands and go and find a job for somebody else, something that at the time they had never done. So think about it like this. These guys, these black guys, they were all like owners of the land, right? They could do what they want, subsistence, they had some cattle, maybe they went out hunting, whatever. But they're chilling. Suddenly, it's like me walking to the JSE and saying to all the stock shareholders, I'm nationalizing your stocks and you must come work for me. It's kind of the same equivalent. What's the next thing? There's the Franchise and Ballot Act, 1892. And that basically said, hey, you know all you guys that can vote? Well, you have to pay a certain amount of money from now on to vote. But remember, a lot of the black guys weren't trading in the currency. They were trading cows or whatever else. So they didn't have the money. They couldn't participate in changing the rules. There's the Glenn Gray Act. Same like the hut tax, except for the Xhosas. The Black Land Act, 1913. Prohibits blacks from owning land. Approximately 7% of the land that's in South Africa, blacks are allowed to participate and work on that. Now, here's the effect. One day, I am tilling my farm. And I'll explain why this act actually came into effect. One day, I am tilling my farm, right? Now, because I'm a subsistence farmer and I have a cooperative, I don't sell my produce for profit. I eat my produce, and any surplus I sell. Right. Which means that a farmer, a white farmer, who is farming for profit will always be disadvantaged because I can sell my produce at whatever price. If I have 8 carrots left, I can sell them at 5 rand. I don't care. Whatever your price is, I'll sell it for less, make my money, because I don't, I'm a subsistence farmer. I've already eaten by the time I'm selling my goods. So what happens on one day, these guys are tilling the land. On the next day, they are banished from that land. A week later, they return to that land because now they've got nothing, right? As sharecroppers. So they return to the land to till that land, but this time for a salary. So you see what's happening? We've always framed this thing as just about race. But this is really, it's almost like a systematic economic thing happening here. And people wonder, damn it, why am I broke? Why my grandmother doesn't leave me like a trust fund? The Natives Urban Act, 1923, creates a labor pool and restricts movement. It's one of the first acts that later become known as the Group Areas Act. And the point there was, no, guys, you guys, like all of you, you can't leave this room. If you leave this room, you'll be thrown in jail. So what do? You sit here and you have to, survive. But because of the cluster and the concentration, it becomes difficult to survive. It makes it easy for me to come to any of you and say, I'll give you a job. And if 2 years ago you would have said, I want a job for $100, now, because of this concentration, now you'll take anything. And so on it goes. As I said, guys, this is it. It's like a whole list. This is before the Nats even come into power, before 1948. You had something called the Minimum Wages Act of 1925, and this was to form job reservation for white people only. Certain trades could only be done by whites. The net effect of all of these different laws, and it becomes more sophisticated with time, is the following. The majority of people living in the country go from being landowners to working class overnight. So you went from owning land, you become a working class. However, your income and your means of income are restricted. Because as each year goes on, they might say, well, you can't do electrical engineering, that's reserved. So your means of deriving income, even though you're working class, is restricted. With time, the things that you can buy with the little money you get